Join Nabil, Fraser, and special guest Andrew Mason from Descript for an insightful discussion on the evolution of AI in product design. They explore how Airtable's innovative AI implementation is reshaping user interactions, dive into the challenges of open-world agents, and examine how products are adapting to make AI more accessible and powerful.
So I think it helps to have a buddy that is like constantly in the process, just like gently and somewhat mockingly nudging you.
It's like you have pipes, but we have LLMs right now.
It's such a fundamental mindset shift that it's not the kind of thing that you can just have like a corporate training for a day or something like that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hallway Chat. I'm Nabil. I'm Fraser. And we have a guest here today.
Andrew, that's me.
That is Andrew Mason from Descript. I was talking with Andrew maybe 2 weeks ago. We're talking about it as an established product that has been integrating AI really well. And you'd said something a little bit surprising, I guess. Although once I thought about it, like I use this product all the time and it makes sense, which is Airtable.
Yeah. So context on that. Nabil and I, as a side project, are opening a physical board game club retail establishment in Oakley. And that's actually what we're using Airtable for. I don't use it at Descript. We use other tools, but we picked it up.
You're a heavy Notion guy.
Heavy Notion guy.
Yep.
And picked it up again for this project and got exposed to how they're agentifying the product. What I think is interesting about them and where we look to them for inspiration is that it feels like products are going in this direction, tools at least, of having an editor that's great for humans to interact with, and then a chat sidebar for interacting with an agent that you can use to delegate tasks. And then other forms of AI-based interaction interspersed with sprinkled on top of the editor as well. And you've seen this primarily in vibe coding tools so far, which is kind of the easiest domain because you're just generating text for the most part. I mean, increasingly they are integrating more and more tools, whether it's interactive terminal or whatever else, but it's mostly just generating text. So even though it's the most powerful use case, it's also one of the easiest to get started with. And now everybody else is rushing to follow to agentify their tools.
Cursor for X.
Cursor for X. So we kind of shamelessly talk about Descript as now Cursor for video editing.
Yep.
Airtable is the best example I've seen so far of a non-vibe coding tool that has agentified their product.
I'd probably use it even more heavily than you do now.
For sure.
Than inside that. And I kind of agree, but I guess my question to you is is that an execution thing on their part? Is there something they're doing with the product that you feel is not intuitive? Because for me, it's an easier problem to solve, I guess. The hard thing for me is not the agent running away and doing things inside of any product. So inside of Cursor, the hard thing is not, oh, look, there's a chatbot. I know where to put the chatbot. It's over on the right. That's easy to find space for.
Yeah.
And then there's the articulation layer, does it have tool calling? Can it do things inside this product without me? And that is an execution problem. Did you do it smartly? The problem feels to me can you surface the work? Do you have proof of work? Can you surface the work the agent is doing in a way that the customer or user can understand? So the problem for the average user, if you can't read code and you're vibe coding, you don't really know what it's doing. And so it works really well for front-end tasks where I can yes, I see something visual, like the box is in the wrong place. And I don't have to look at the code. I can see it's wrong and I can fix it. And it's hard without being the coder for it to do back-end or database work or things like that, because you have no idea what it's doing, how many files have just worked. And often when people complain about it going off the rails, it's usually when that happens. I say that analogy to Airtable feels like it's starting in a way from just a more advantageous position because the entire product is a visualization layer for the data underneath. It's literally a database that you can look at visually. When I drag in a PDF with 50 pages in it, and it did an incredibly good job taking a 50-page PDF and figuring out the data types by row, importing it in properly. It was awesome. But also I could have dragged that into Claude or something else and it would have an inherent problem because it's a different product. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And the dimensions upon which you audit the work are relatively limited. If you ask it to generate a bunch of new fields or something like that, then you can go in and you can audit the formula
Yep.
that it wrote or something like that. And then you can trust that the data is right for all 20,000 rows or whatever it is that you have. We talk about this at Descript, this problem of review states and how important is that even? Because like Cursor has had a lot of success despite, and Replit tools like that, despite not really doing a super good job at solving the review state problem. Like you could be happily vibe coding away and have broken a part of your app that you're not refreshing over and over again without knowing about it until days later. Yeah, if you're not being careful. But it's not clear how much it stands in the way
It may not matter. Yeah.
of adoption.
Is that because is the bar different because an average person can't code?
Or because people are using them for prototypes a lot of the time.
Yeah, so it doesn't really have stuff. Yeah. What do you think works so well at Airtable's implementation?
The most important thing for these products is that they fulfill the promise that they're making through the way that the product is presented. And Airtable kind of, over time, amped up the intensity of the promise that they were making. So the first AI features that I remember using were kind of like AI fields and stuff like that. Like, what was some of the stuff you were doing to autofill? Yeah, you would like autofill. Right?
Basically, kind of like the same things that the very first Claude, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but Claude used to have a Google Sheets plugin. The same version as that, which is simply, I will run a query on this cell, and I will do that hundreds of times over and over and over again. That was the first version, right?
Right. So they started small with something like that. It was useful, did a pretty good job of fulfilling the promise. And then as they started rolling out the agent, the sidebar, it kind of started as a button in the header that would open a sidebar on the right, but it felt like a very kind of optional thing, experience that you could very well get through using Airtable without even knowing that it existed. And then they recently, I think after really getting their confidence levels pretty high, have redesigned. They've gone as far as to like brand it as a refounding moment of the company.
Feels like it.
Yeah, where now they have like the starter prompt design pattern on the homepage, and then when you get in there, it's big and on the left side. And this is what we call an open world agent, meaning the promise that it's making is that you can do anything. And so far in my experience, like it's pretty good. It's very difficult to know like what the bar is for what percentage of times it needs to do what you ask it to do, or what failure is acceptable versus isn't, because people seem to have a pretty high tolerance for failure on a lot of these things. But it's enough that you keep going back and you believe in it enough to try again with your next ask.
What is a open world agent? That feels like a name we apply to things that we're trying to take back the word agentic from being overused and butchered and trying to define a specific behavior. So what is that?
Yeah, so we should talk about agentifications of products that we think have not been successful by comparison, but a lot of the ones that we've seen end up feeling like hard-coded AI workflows.
Yeah.
Maybe with like a type ahead element that gives the illusion of choice and open worldness, but they really are just like, you can have any color card you want as long as it's blue kind of things.
Yep.
So those feel like agents on rails as opposed to something that can try to do whatever you ask.
Do you have an example of that? I mean, you can cut it for you too.
All of our competitors.
Not a direct. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Do you have a thought of one, like a company like that you feel like has launched agents or launched? Oh, I opened up a chatbot and I try to do something. I'm trying to do the one right now too. Like I open up a chatbot, I start doing something. I can do it as long as I say the 5 incantations.
I think the entire first wave of agentic like platforms for that, where like you have a canvas and you say like, when this happens, I'm going to draw a line over to this other function, and I'm going to draw a line over this. Like Lindy, there's a whole bunch of them that fit that bucket. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like on Rails, like it can then go through a pipeline. It's like you have no pipes, but we have LLMs right now.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit less like coding, which is very open and almost like the kind of phrasing it using game design would be like, there's an emergent property that can come out of the work. Like you can surprise yourself with what it can do.
Yeah.
The same way that like in diffusion models, you're suddenly trading around weird words and incantations that lead to images you never thought of before. This kind of a virtual property. And yeah, some of that early agentic stuff, which just feels like you're kind of like natural language prompting into what is clearly a series of if-then statements. Background.
Yeah.
That feeling.
That's right.
And so your phrasing is to try and grab back, like, all agentic is not the same. And open world is this feeling when you tell what you want and then, like, you'll go figure it out. And whether it's writing code on the back end or tool calling a bunch or who knows, but like great things come out the other side. Is that the basic framing?
Yeah, where you don't feel like you're constrained by these discrete widgets necessarily. And you change the way that you think about those projects and you approach them. Like instead of having like a wizard with a bunch of predefined forks in the road, it's amazing to see how users just start asking so much more of their products and expecting so much more as soon as that switch flips in their mind to think of it as, oh, this is truly open world. It's safe to ask for anything.
Yeah, I have something that builds on that. Before we sat down, you were saying that the difference historically between like a Notion and a Coda and an Airtable is that some of them felt very doc-centric and this felt very spreadsheet-centric. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's part of what makes this big push into AI actually work, at least from my perspective, in that a spreadsheet is a layperson's database and you can use it for anything, right? But it has just enough structure that you can use it for, planning your budget or planning your trip or tracking whatever, your tabletop storefront, right? And if you think of it as a database, then you have chat as an interface to give it direction, right? Chat is the layperson's way for interacting with software, increasingly, it seems. And I think for a very long time. And then
you're long on chat.
I'm long on chat.
Primary interface, yeah.
But then over the past 12 to 18 months, like things are so fluid and dynamic that there's been fundamental new capabilities that have been delivered that we've all done in our spreadsheet anyway. Historically, like, oh, I want this cell to update with the most recent information from a search. And historically, you'd open up your Google Sheets and you go do a search and maybe put in like the stock value or whatever if you're tracking your portfolio or your fantasy baseball team. And like agentic, like search with reasoning can just do that automatically now, right? And they still have like the same wizard experience in Airtable, where you say like, for this cell, if this trigger happens, then I want these three other things to occur.
Yeah.
But the nice thing here is that you can set all of that up by going underneath the hood and fiddling around with the pipes if you want. You can also do it through chat. And you can be like, when this column is updated, do this thing, and this thing can be a web search, or it can integrate into Gmail, or this, that, or the other thing. It can just be a trigger. I think it's far more approachable for most people with that type of experience.
Well, the workable metaphor hasn't started ahead of everybody else, right? If you've been working with spreadsheets for years, you may not even understand. I mean, now you'll even understand that Airtable is a database versus like a spreadsheet thing.
For sure.
Extra things, like for most people. But that metaphor is powerful because you probably bunk update to it a bunch of times. And so we're trying to get agentic and you're trying to be open world and allow anybody to type anything. They have a really broad set of desires, right? Like, that they try to, do a very complicated formula at one time, or they just wish that every single time I have to this column, it would update the other. Like, there's just a lot of embedded wishes. And I don't know that that's true everywhere. Like, I don't know that open world agentic cursor for X is actually like universal approach that should be applied everywhere. I think it works similarly for video. You don't have to toot your own horn, but like, I think I use all these products. You've done the best job of actually getting something that's emergent in open world. A lot of your competitors are kind of on the rails. But the thing that I felt when I first used it is like, I, unlike Fraser, complain some about chat interfaces. It's like, I'm an old school design guy. And I'm like, no, like, people are dumb. I put an Alexa in my house and nobody knows what it's good for. And they don't know what commands are there. Like, that you need interfaces and buttons so I know that I can do this and do that. But the thing about video that is very similar to spreadsheets is just, I think you know what you want. You may not know that Descript is good enough to do it yet, but you have a sense of like, hey, this thing feels choppy. Can you smooth it out? I stay out too much. I'm so angry. Can you fix that? Like, you do have these like innate natural language desires the same way that you might have for a spreadsheet because the metaphor is so fixed. So you're like in other words, like these categories are more alike than, frankly, like,
For sure.
I don't know, certain parts of finance software or sales CRMs or lots of the other areas where they're trying to get agentic.
Yeah. There's another thing that is interesting where if you look at the vibe coding tools like the Lovables and the Bolts, when you go to their homepage, they'll have like a big open text field. And then they have some starter kind of templates down below that are like, build me a app that I can use for tracking my next home purchase or something like that. It's almost certainly not something
Not what
that
you
you
want.
want, but it's designed to just give you inspiration about the kinds of things, just to get your mind going. But in tools like Airtable or like Descript, there's like a workflow discovery aspect to it that you have to do with these suggestions that you're having. So when you open the Airtable chat agent, it will have these kind of like personalized suggestions on types of analysis that you might do or interfaces that you might build on top of your database, because there is this like discovery problem of what is possible, like what is this thing capable of doing with my data, that probably reflects the fact that these things aren't truly open world. Like you can't literally do anything with your video or your data set in here. It has like a discrete set of tools. And even once you have all the tools in the app hooked up, there's still other tools that you haven't built yet.
What does it suggest right now if you click on, so Fraser, just so you know, you're looking at the back end for the tabletop library over here. And so it has things like all the reservations in the system, a list of every game we carry, all the members, stuff like that. It's all that stuff.
So it has 3 sections of suggested prompts: ask, analyze, and build. Under ask, find reservations hosted by David Chen on January 7th.
I wonder if there's a reservation on January 7th that David Chen has.
And then build, it has like actual apps you can build on top of the data.
Yeah, and the ask, analyze, build is basically taking the 3 things you want to do agentically, right? Ask is very simple looped questions. Look at the data and give me an answer.
Yep.
Analyze is basically a way to say structured SQL pairs. That's kind of the version of that, right? It is like, we don't want to call this a SQL generator because that's going to freak people out when they don't know what that is. But it's basically like do some analysis on all of the information that I have. And then build is some version of talk to a backend agent and fill out a bunch of fields. Or does it do more than that? I think it does.
Yeah, because they have these interfaces that you build, and so it'll just like automatically create views of your data that have a limited number of fields for whatever.
Yeah, go build a login and flow page on interfaces that add somebody to the membership database or something like that.
A design decision that I love is that chat UI is on the left. It basically says like, this is the primary way you should be interacting. Here's your interaction point, and then here on the right is the I'm hesitant to say artifact because it's quite different from what that word means now. But like, here is the
no, it is. That's the Adobe artifact. Sorry. That it is. That's the Anthropic artifact. That is the thing I'm manipulating. So that's right. The thing I'm manipulating.
Right.
But here, the thing that you're manipulating is familiar, consistent, ever present, like it's the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I think actually a good contrast is Notion's implementation of AI, which I think is quite bad, even though I like Notion a lot as a product. And I'm sure this is going to evolve. But what they have is they have a little, like almost like the typical help bubble design pattern that exists in the bottom corner of the app. They've turned that into AI. It's really cool as like a enterprise search kind of Glean. Is that what it's called? That they're turning it into that kind of a competitor.
Yeah.
But as like a co-editor, it's really a poor experience. It's not designed in a way that suggests that. And when you actually do it, it's often like rewriting the document in chat and then forcing you to bring it in and merge it, or it puts it in the document as a suggestion in a way that just probably seemed like a really good idea to not getting back to review states.
Right.
But it turns out that it feels better, I think, for most people when the agent is pretty aggressive about just making changes, and then users understand that there's an undo button.
Yeah. Did you ever play around with Descript at a little helper like that?
I think we had the blessing of seeing that it We didn't
We'll try.
from how Notion did it and kind of bypass that. We have it as a right sidebar right now, which reflects where we are in our ability to fulfill the promise of the agent. And it will eventually make its way to the left, which just feels like you were saying, Fraser, like that's
Right.
yeah. If you're serious about this thing being the way that you want people to interface with your tool, then that's where it goes.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was really important was that you can interact with it through chat. You can go deep into the bowels and like mess around with the settings to set things up if you want. You can also just treat it as a spreadsheet. Like you can go in and edit a row, and you can make things the way that you want. And back to a couple of things that we've discussed for over many months now is that it engenders trust. Your work product is there. You can QC it, you can QA it, like you can gain confidence that it's doing what you want it to do when you walk away by looking at it in the familiar UI with which you expect it to be. And if it's not right, you can edit it. You haven't played around with it enough, but I also imagine that you could, another thing that we've discussed is that sometimes you just want to show the AI the way that it should be. And I imagine that if you're building a CRM or some other thing that you can use a spreadsheet for, you could probably set up a row and be like, when new things come in, I want you to complete the...
You can't do that, and that is my number one. Yeah, but I'm so glad you walked into that. No, because if you think about Claude as an interaction, this happens all the time. Like I'm trying to teach Claude to write a certain way, and I'll give it a couple of samples, and I'll say like this, or can you summarize a sentence down to this, and then here are 4 more sentences do the same thing. Like
it's like give it a month. Right? Do you think it's going to be a month? It's going to be a month.
I hope so. I hope so, because right now you're still back in. When I do that kind of work, you're back in formula land. I'm opening up the formula tab. And then in the formula tab in Airtable, there's a way to fill it out with AI. And you're typing in something, you're hitting go, you're looking at 20 samples. You're like, that's not it. You're trying to change one word in the prompt, hit 20 samples. That's a lot of fun tokens for Airtable to charge me for. Look at the outputs versus this kind of like habit or user pattern, which seems much more valuable for how LLMs and transformers work, which is like, just show me 3 or 4 or 5 examples and I will intuit. Instead of you trying to figure out the English language fun way of explaining to me the work I'm supposed to be doing, just show me outputs and let me figure out how to get from here to there.
You in this case being the AI, not you to be a user.
Yes.
Right. But like, I want to fill out two rows as a user. And be like, I'm going to automate the new names in column A. And whenever a new name shows up in column A, go and fill out the spreadsheet like rows 1 and 2. Right.
That'd be great.
Ship it.
We're not
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah. I do want to go back real quick to the primary interface being on the left. The 3 modes of, there's a very interesting decision and doing the 3 modes that I think is actually really prescient, which is I'm going to end up using the word open world a lot from here forward. So thanks for that. The interesting feeling of an open world experience is you feel like you push all the power to the user to think about how they really want to work with this product. So never mind what are the 4 buttons we put in the top left, which is how you properly use the product or whatever it is. It's like now I get to actually ask questions about what do I want my workflow actually to be? And can I like have a couple of prompts that I copy and paste and share with my other teammates, and we just run every Airtable through these sets of prompts or every vScript or whatever. That's the beauty of open world, is to ask this question how you really want to work versus a workflow that's forced upon you. Awesome. The emergent property of that is like, what are the choices that you have? And the problem, of course, is like you have a lot of choices in Airtable. There's like thousands. And finding a way to bucket into 3 basic modes, I think is something that it's enough that a user can keep it in their head, right? Hey, there are 3 things you're really supposed to be thinking about AI as roles inside of Airtable. In a way that, like, for instance, like if you just look at ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, I don't think you've seen enough of that. Probably arguably the only thing you've seen that is doing that is like they took a whole bunch of post-training and other like choices they made and they boxed that all together and they called that deep research. And we now know what that is, and it's across all the apps and it's a different mode of interaction, which is great. Surprising to me that we're like 2-3 years in and like there's basically one thing.
Totally. And one of our kind of goals for the second half of this year at Descript is a internal facing goal that we call AI gene therapy. And it's really about rewiring everybody's brains to be more AI first and incorporate these AI tools into their workflows. And I think every company is struggling with this transition. It's uneven, where some people take to it very naturally, and other people just have a harder time thinking of how to make use of these tools. And I think that comes down to what you're talking about is we haven't yet created like a pat framework for what these things do. We haven't taken this alien power and packaged it into little widgets, which is what people are used to, is having these products handed to them. It's just unbridled power. And the people who are doing well with it are the ones who can have the sensitivity to figure out like, oh, I could use it for this. I could use it for this. And probably once that, framework comes along, we'll see more people making the shift.
Have you found hints for how to nudge people from, what was the phrasing you used?
We have a spectrum that of like people's adoption of any piece of technology, where it goes from on one end of the spectrum, you have technology that you're like actively hostile towards. Then you have people who are skeptical of something, and then you have converted and then rewired. And where like I would consider myself with AI as someone who's converted but not rewired. Being converted is like when you've used Amazon forever to buy books, but they sell paper towels, but you still go to Costco to buy your paper towels. And then one day you wake up and you're like, why am I doing this? I should just buy my paper towels on Amazon. That's being rewired, is when you really cognitively changed your neural pathways to adopt to this new technology. And I think we're all like somewhere along that journey. Like for me, the biggest thing was actually like starting this, side project with you, where we were forcing ourselves to use AI tools, just like using them. And getting outside of your normal
and that was partially because we're starting a whole bunch. One, we don't want to hire a bunch of people and it's a side project and we don't have a lot of time. Two, we're both very curious about AI already. And three, and this is where it's hard to do this inside of an org that already exists or a pattern that already exists, is like, we were doing all this for the first time. So it's like, oh, how are we going to come up with a mission statement? It's like, how can AI help us do that? How are we going to come up with a website? How is AI going to help us do that? How are we going to build a database? How is it like, and so you get to litigate this all from scratch, which does feel like a much harder thing than I'm at year 9 at Procter and Gamble, making my internal spreadsheets or something like that. And like, now I'm going to try to do it an entirely new way next week.
And it's such a fundamental mindset shift that it's not the kind of thing that you can just have like a corporate training for a day or something like that and be done with it. We did a hackathon for the entire company, and that was a step in the right direction. But if it stops with that, then there's too much inertia to just fall back to your old ways.
To bring this conversation back to the Airtable conversation, the one thing that Nabil and I have disagreed with a lot is on these broad, welcome to our debate, on the broad horizontal assistants like ChatGPT and Claude. I think that solving that rewiring problem at the product level is a fool's errand in the short term. And people are going to have to just suffer through a cathartic rewiring process, and that product teams and the research teams have much more fruitful things to focus on there. I think in these open world cases that at your definition, Descript, Airtable, that are open world agents, but still kind of constrained to a domain or a set of tasks, I think you would lean all the way into product that accelerates the rewiring.
Why do you make that distinction that it's a fool's errand for Claude? And or like, where in the spectrum would you be?
Well, because there's you are coming to Descript, like you are coming there to edit audio or video for a very broad, diverse set of reasons, but you're still there to do like one job.
Your goal.
And I think that you can have Rails is not the right way. You can help nudge people in the open world problem to figure out what it is that they can do in a much more graceful way, because of that natural constraint. Whereas like, where the hell do you start with rewiring somebody in Claude on everything that you can do? I mean, I use it as my health coach, my fitness coach, my financial advisor, my tax account. Like, I use it for work. I use it for all these things. It would be a cruddy experience that would fail. I have high conviction it would just fail. It'd be messy. And there's higher order things that they can do in the short term to try to solve that problem. And then that problem gets solved for them by having people.
Is this your conception of why something like GPTs was just too early?
Sure. It was just too early. And I also think it was
Maybe not architected the way.
Yeah. Sure.
But your point is it's partly cultural. Like you could have obviously product marketed better or structured it better, but part of it is like, it's funny to say that in front of Andrew, because obviously like a lot of the conversations when you have about Descript is like how hard it is to make a product that is horizontal versus vertical in nature. So never mind looking up at Claude, you're looking, at even more verticalized software, and you're looking at the product management challenge of building something like Descript or Notion or Airtable, these things that are very horizontal. And it's an interesting point I hadn't thought about before, which is like how much more different would it be to navigate AI when you're at the fully horizontal? It can be everything to everybody standpoint. I don't know the answer to what it leads you to, but it certainly should think through different decisions.
I think so. I'll just keep going on that while I'm on a rant and you're taking a thought. I think the equivalent would be it's saying to Google in 2004 is there's a lot of things that you can search for, and you should add scaffolding for the end users to help them figure out what it is they want to search for, or like how to better search. Mm-hmm. And I think that history has shown that the winning bet was over time solve that implicitly, automatically on the back end for the end user. Yeah, but that wasn't like a day two problem for them to solve.
Yeah, and it also was emerging from using the horizontal, so
absolutely
not
right.
Interface.
And like imagine if you like type into a search in 2004, and then they're like, it looks like you're trying to do this type of search. Would you like to actually end it with this type of thing? And like you mean scram.
Yeah, there's an equivalent to the "let me Google that for you" thing happening with AI, I think, which is like that meme is like basically reflective of people who have not yet fully been rewired for search, right?
Yes.
And
they're asking the question because they haven't rewired for search, and so it's like, well, fine, I will go use Google for you, and I'll get the answer.
Yeah, right. And Nabil was ahead of me on getting rewired for AI, so we would be in these meetings, and he would often be the one that would do the equivalent action of the "let me Google that for you," where we'd be like pondering over a mission statement or like how do we get a permit or something like that. And he would remind us of this alien power that we all have access to that can just solve the problem for us. So I think it helps to have a buddy that is like constantly in the process of just like gently and somewhat mockingly nudging you.
Well, then at your company, you have a lot of different levers at your control. And a lot of incentive to try to politely nudge people to adopt this new alien technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that I would bet in on that.
This makes me think the left panel, which sounds as simple as like, moving the UX over to the left. In a way, it's that buddy. Do you know what I mean? Like this is a software company who is telling you that it's time to think differently about this product. It is sending a very different message to a user than, the 2 years ago version of this was, or a year ago version of this was everybody asking, adding the little ask AI button in the upper right-hand corner, the little floating thing that you can now ask AI questions, or in Notion's case, the bottom right corner. Anchoring it to the left feels like the person inside of your org who is kindly telling you that if you're just interacting with the artifact on the right, you're probably underutilizing this product. I don't think I'd really ever thought about that until right now, but it's actually a kind of a profound statement that the piece of software is making if you're trying to get your users to change their behavior and think about you differently. Because even if you don't open it that often or use it that often in the beginning, it's like trying to tell you should start from the left and move to the right. Yeah. So obviously your brain should be moving in this direction.
That's why it legitimately feels like we're refounding another company. Like the primary way that they're telling their users to interface with their product has changed dramatically. And my guess is Gemini products and Google products have all sorts of challenges.
Yeah, it'd be hard. Like
Google Sheets already has like it like slides in from the right, and you can like in theory be chatting with your Google Sheet.
Yep,
much like this, except it feels profoundly different.
Yep.
The other thing along that same line that I absolutely loved, and it took me a moment to realize the brilliance of it, and kudos to whichever PM and or engineering team at Airtable came up with this is your little nested history.
Yes.
When you're working on it, I was like, I want to go back and fiddle around with what I was doing previously. And it's anchored on chat, where I brought my mouse up and it said like, okay, you can go back to chats. I'm like, well, wait, I want the previous iteration of the spreadsheet. And it's like, no, it is telling you again that your primary interface here is chat.
Oh, wow. I see what you're looking at. I wouldn't be surprised if the PM or the designer that designed that is hearing this and saying, oh, we didn't do that on purpose. Bad design, but it's so cool that
Half of the great features
come out that way.
implicit decisions were made.
Right. Because you're saying that this feels like a version history nav or like back to your projects or something like that.
It just reiterates the idea that chat is the primary way with which you're interacting with this product. It is, you're not going back to your sheets. You're not going back to your database or whatever the Airtable proper noun is for those. You're going back to your chats.
And then ironically, of course, like much like Cursor, you could have 2 or 3 or 4 chats that are ostensibly different projects, different areas of this Airtable I'm working on.
Yeah.
And by categorizing them that way, it's saying, hey, I've got 3 or 4 workflows that are going on different subjects. That is obviously just a few steps away from what we're now seeing in Cursor and Replit. And elsewhere, we're just like, oh, that's a background agent that is an ongoing task that just keeps doing it in the background and so on and so forth, right? Yeah. Instead of just doing this one time, can you just keep doing that?
Right. You can imagine this starting to feel like an inbox where stuff is active or archived or stars or whatever.
Nabil was showing me some of the agentic aspects that you all have on your Airtables for your project. And it runs almost like cron jog async, and it's like this thing's been updated, and then it's forcing these other 5 rows to go and update. And so you could absolutely imagine it feeling like an inbox where it's done work.
Yeah.
The work is outputted into a spreadsheet that I don't know how many white collar people live in spreadsheets, but aren't actually using it for like Excel type formulas.
Right.
It's just to like organize my thoughts.
And well, it's not just Excel type formulas, right? The beauty of this is that most people who use this probably use it in a spreadsheet, not a database.
100%.
And so I'm sure, executives of the Airtable over the years, continually bangs their head up against why isn't we use things like a database? It's so much more powerful.
Yeah.
And the good news about having an agent built for you versus you building it yourself is that it can build a lot of those lookup tables and a lot of that like interconnection between sheets that you wouldn't build yourself. In other words, you can build it like a database, which makes it 10 times more powerful. So on the back end, you feel like, oh, wow, we're just going to end up with people using Airtable in ways they could never use Google Sheets. For sure.
And then it takes like information from previous cells and kicks off like web agentic searches off of that, and then fills up the rest of your spreadsheet. It's really remarkable.
One kind of like side note to all of this that I feel like I should call out is we're talking a lot about product design. And I think like for us at Descript, we've been very explicit about saying that all of that is a tenth of the importance of what happens inside of that chat window, wherever the hell it is.
Oh, yeah.
Like Descript historically is primarily a design idea. It is like, what if you could take a video editor and make it work like a doc? And from there, it's just like solving a systems design puzzle propped up by really cool technology. And as we've started to focus on the agent, we've had to make a break from that and say like, that remains true on the editor, but for the agent, and there's no better example of this than Cursor, which is terribly designed product. Like, and if you remember when, Chat or the Composer first came out, it was almost impossible to find it.
Right.
It's still like, doesn't open by default. It's in the left sidebar. It's really easy to miss it. And they've been successful in spite of all of that. And so I think like all this stuff is really cool, but it's still just like a kind of like a side note into the importance of does the agent fulfill the promise of what you ask it to do?
Yep.
So you were showing me the agent in Descript.
Yeah.
And it was like fulfilling the promise. You were blown away.
Like if I had to list a handful of products, first of all, I don't think very many companies that actually, for all the like agentic last year plus Fraser, like I actually don't think many companies have actually fulfilled on the promise of making things. If we just went to the like Cursor for X, and we talk about this on a regular basis because we're looking for companies that are like actually rewiring their whole companies to be this way. And there actually aren't very many. I think part of that is not because those people are not competent or, well, I actually think it's an opportunity more for companies that are horizontal in nature. A lot of SaaS software companies, especially the last 5 years, have been trending more towards verticalized SaaS, which means like inherently, never mind how good the product people are, the CEO, but they are a single threaded workflow tool.
Yeah.
Like that is what they are. And so the opportunity afforded to them to be quote unquote agentic is just less. Like the same thing that was a frustrating product exercise a few years ago for Descript, which was like, oh my God, we have this promise of doing this thing. Can I have a Word doc? Is like, can I edit a video like a Word doc? Is also like an unbelievable challenge. The same way that Airtable, like, can I make a database as easy as a spreadsheet? Is an unbelievable challenge that takes years and years and years. That difficulty is exactly the opportunity when you get to agentic AI, if you can execute well. I'm really impressed by it, but I don't give Andrew and his team all the credit. Like, I think part of it is like, you guys are in a problem space that is perfect for this type of problem. It is a situation where I want to see the Word doc on the right that shows me what an agent is doing. I need a display layer. That's great. But ultimately, do I want to be hunting and pecking around a bunch of interfaces to find a little button that says remove uhs and ums? Or I just want to talk to a thing on the left, tell it what I want to do with the product, and say like, hey, every time I drop a file in here, it's like, I tend to ramble in the beginning, so make sure you heavily cut the beginning and then remove that one as an up. Like, just give it a list of instructions the same way you would talk to Cursor and then know it's going to do that reliably on a regular basis. Like, I think you have like an interesting problem space. And there's just like not a lot of them. Like, I actually think we couldn't do this monthly for 20 other products that are behaving in this way that's actually transformative to the business.
Yeah. So another example of that, getting back to this whole like feature discovery thing and how the agent almost unexpectedly, we think, will improve feature discovery by being open world. And like before the agent came along, we had this problem of building new features and not having like intuitive language to describe it. For example, like we had a AI when we had remove filler words as an action. Like, first of all, when we released that, nobody knew what a filler word was.
Right.
It's like a technical concept. And so what do you call that? That's the best we could come up with. We have another AI action called edit for clarity. You know, what does that do? Like, is anyone going to go and look for a feature called edit for clarity? No way. But now you can just go into an agent and say, hey, can you, however you would express that.
Yeah, I'm rambling a little bit. Can you fix that?
Yeah.
Whatever you'd say.
Same thing with like, one of the cool things you can do with the agent is you can take a recording, you can split it into different, what we call scenes, and then apply different layouts, apply like B-roll and like what we call internally window dressing a video. But that's not a word anybody knows. There's no word for that. Like, I've asked everybody I know that, you know, works in video, there's no word for that concept of like adding a visual, doing a visual pass. Everybody calls it something a little bit different.
Right.
And it's really hard to like wrap that up into a product and expose it at the right moment. But but people will type it into the agent quite naturally using whatever language they want.
Chat.
Yeah, fine. Okay, fine.
See, so I agree. Like, none of this stuff matters if the actual product that gets delivered ultimately is good. In your case, it's these edits, it's the stylistic changes and whatnot. Have you benefited from investing into that technology and now the agents are making it more like usable, more like discoverable? Or are you designing things that the agents can consume? Yeah.
Designing things that the agent can consume.
Right now, your first pass, like, are you making tools for the agent, or are you giving agent access to all the tools you had previously used?
It started with giving agent, like wiring up all the tools that we already had. And now it's building new agent first tools where we have to remind ourselves not to kill ourselves thinking about how we would let people design an avatar, like an AI avatar or something like that, and how we expose that through the editor interface, because most people very quickly are probably just going to be doing that through the agent.
Right.
Our expectation is that within a year, 3/4 of interactions and in the app and actions that people take are going to be agent first.
Well,
We added like a bit on every analytics event on
Right.
whether a human did this thing or the agent.
Whoa. And where's that at now?
I mean, we're rolling out. I don't know where it is now. We're still in the
Okay.
process of,
Okay.
of
Okay.
launching the agent.
Right.
So it's
Right.
pretty low.
We might be here to talk about Airtable. And so we can just say we don't want to talk about this, but like I'm so interested around if you think the primary way in a year's time is going to be interacting with the agent, are you going to have a refounding of Descript? And what I think by that is how are you going to navigate that you have a large, important user base who is familiar with the product today versus your excitement and enthusiasm for what will likely feel like a dramatic new product?
I think the question that, so it does feel, it's the first time I've ever used the word pivot to talk about Descript is like the focus on the agent. Up until then, pretty much everything we've done is something that we thought we were going to do at some point.
Okay.
And the agent has really been the thing that takes us by surprise. And whether you call it like a refounding moment, that's just like a branding exercise.
Yes.
But I think it's an interesting question that I've thought about. Like, Nabil, you should talk about like Replit. Like the question is whether you as a company need to make really hard choices
Yes.
that will alienate your existing users in
Yes.
order to bring about the agent.
Yes.
And
Yeah. How much of your current user base and current knowledge and current success is a platform with which to stand on to get to the next thing, or an albatross that will
That's
actually
right.
keep you from the next thing you're trying to build? And yeah, the Replit example is that company, which was obviously not an agentic company or even a code gen company initially, it was, the way your 16-year-old son or daughter first made their first code online. It's like, it was basically like a coding environment in the cloud, your first cloud little thing to make usually to make your Discord bot, which is how it first came on my radar. That group has a low propensity to pay and a really high engagement cycle. And that's wildly different from if you think you're now an agentic cloud company that is going to compete with Cursor and is for everybody on the planet, as they would phrase it, for everybody on the planet who has never coded, this is what they want to be their first experience talking to someone who's coding. And now you're using Claude or their internal models. You're charging per token. You can't be free to use. It can't be structured like a social network where you're sharing all your things with everybody else because everybody else is going to talk to Claude as well, and that'll charge you money. Like that whole structure means that Replit went through a process that they mostly end up having to move on from a lot of the users that frankly got them up to $1 billion valuation, like
Right.
that they were sitting on. And like that's a lot of courage, frankly. There's a lot of CEOs and leadership teams that would not have been able to do that. And kudos to them for navigating that. This does not feel like the same thing for Descript. I'm sure there are users that for you guys have come along that have certain sets of expectations, keep asking you for some esoteric little thing that they use in Adobe After Effects or something like that if they're pros. I'm sure you've gotten that forever. And I'm sure with Airtable, similarly, they've navigated this like, well, if I'm a real database nerd, why doesn't Airtable have this database nerd fit? But that doesn't mean you have to leave them behind, I don't think.
I don't think so either, but it's something I ask myself a lot, right? There's not just the pricing change that they made, but also, I mean, if you had used Replit a year ago or whatever it was just like an IDE in the cloud, and it felt like an IDE where you're like a code editor.
Yeah.
And now, if that part of the app exists anymore, it's incredibly buried.
That's true.
Yeah, they're trying to go in and write. I'm sure you can still go in and like open a file and write code, but
Yeah,
it's
that's slowly buried.
really
So whether buried this app will be twice as buried in another 6 months.
Yeah. So there's a question of like, is there an equivalent move to that for us? I think like what Replit has done seems so smart to me. Cursor, by comparison, I think there's like a 0% chance that a year or two from now, you're going to see like product managers vibe coding in a fork of VS Code. It's just like not the right product or abstraction level. Even the Cursor, founders and other people talk about how there's going to be this new abstraction layer that becomes the source of truth for the stuff, the software that we're writing that looks more like a spec. A natural language English thing that
you should be talking to a PRD, not to the document.
Right.
Yep.
So like what Replit has said, like code is not the right layer to focus on. We're actually going to start building out a human editor, and they're putting effort into like a WYSIWYG style editor so that, sometimes you don't want to tell the agent to change the hex code on a button or something like that. You can just click on it and change it yourself, and that's more efficient and precise. So we feel like that's what we've been up to all along, is creating that new human editor abstraction layer that's higher level than words instead of like timelines. And so we're pretty well suited to it, but try to keep asking ourselves, like, if there's something more aggressive and disruptive that we're missing.
Yeah. I mean, arguably the only one, and this is true for all the question that everybody asks, because everything in AI asks questions in every layer of the abstraction, is like, do humans have to be involved at all? There's a bet in Airtable, there's a bet in Descript, there's a bet in Cursor and Replit that humans are involved, that a human has to look at the PRD. Even if you're upping the abstraction layer, there's a human involved. And I don't know, I'm happy to make that bet that the creativity of a human is still somewhere in the loop, even if that loop moves from every 10 seconds to every minute to every 5 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we should be done. Let's do it. Thank you so much for coming and hanging and chatting.
I think you were like, for a period of time, the epitome of the Silicon Valley promise of founders. It felt like it was very pure, like you wanted to go do this thing and you wanted to build, and the outcome was the outcome, but you even handled that in a way that just continued to build on the promise of like Silicon Valley as a concept. And so, like, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was fun. Thanks, guys.